So, Barbara, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation related to the future is calling us to greatness.
Well, I totally feel it is calling us to greatness. I love that title, and I personally think you're great. So there we go.
Well, the feeling is mutual. Thank you. As you know, because I've shared it with you, but I want to share this in case any of our viewers or listeners are not aware of this. I've known Barbara. I've known you since 1989, where we met at Omega in David Gershon's Gaia leadership class, and I've considered you just a
Y-
precious older sister on the path ever since. So it's a delight to have this conversation.
Thank Yes, yes, indeed. I feel this is truly an evolutionary family.
Yes, amen. And that's one of the things that I've really appreciated. I'm going to share this, even though it's a little bit intimate or personal. But Barbara and I have had conversations regularly on various holidays because we want to speak with our
Yes,
mimetic family, not just our evolutionary family, just not just our biological families.
yes, yes. Just for a second on that subject, I'm 84, Michael, and I've discovered a new pattern of aging,
Okay, say more.
which I'm in, and it's called emerging.
Yes, exactly.
And when you are an elder, there's an old pattern of how you could be maybe with your children and your grandchildren or something.
Hmm.
But instead, if you're moving forward with others into an absolutely new condition for planet Earth,
Yeah.
something is happening to me. I just want to be just to say this because you mentioned family that really I feel is deep in the soul of evolutionary humans right now, which I'd like to discuss at some point with you.
Well, that'd be great. I want to get into a whole lot with you, but I realize before we do, in case there's anybody, which I doubt there will be too many people, but in case somebody is not familiar with your work, could you just please just give a little short introduction to sort of who is Barbara Marx Hubbard and what are you particularly passionate about?
Well, I feel I'm a genuine evolutionary soul that was coded with the quest to discover the evolutionary process and be part of it. And that I have been awakened by awareness of the whole story of evolution to become an evolutionary human, which means I'm an evolutionary educator. I spend a lot of time on educating on the new story of creation and our part in it. I have been a candidate for vice president of the United States, my name was placed in nomination to map, track, connect, and communicate what's working in the world, but which I still think the vice president should do.
Yes, I agree.
And I have been a mother of five, a grandmother of eight. And right now, as I was saying, at this stage in my life of being 84, and also since I celebrated the planetary birth experience, which I'd been motivated to celebrate since 1960s,
Hmm.
I'm living out the vision of a planetary emergence, a planetary birth, a planetary evolution, and still am part of it.
Yes.
And looking for the exact, this is a pattern of what my life is about now at this stage of evolution.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I mean, that's one of the things where I felt such a soul, heart, purpose, life purpose communion or connection with you around is that, that this whole notion that we are the universe, we are evolution, become conscious of itself. And then how do we honor the past? How do we live our lives and recreate our institutions with a sense that the past is rooting us on and the future is calling us to greatness? How do we then move
Right.
consciously into the future and create conscious social structures so that our politics, our economics, our education, our systems of governance, our systems of everything become ever wiser, to use Tom Atlee's sort of language, and become more conscious so that we participate in a mutually enhancing human earth relationship, which, as we all know, is lacking in many cases now. So
Yeah.
could you share, Barbara, because I find your thinking so fertile and so rich, and you have such a way with language. Share some of the core memes, the core ideas that you have been carrying and still are carrying in ways that help, again, people who are participating in this conversation series who have not immersed themselves in your work. Help bring us all up
Okay.
to speed at this point.
Well, here are some basic thoughts. Our crisis is a birth of a co-creative universal humanity. Our planet Earth is in a crisis where we can't continue to grow as we have in the past
Yes.
and survive.
Right.
So, particularly in the lives of women who used to reproduce up to maximum, there is a huge shift from what I call procreation and self survival to co creation and self evolution. And I think that this change is being triggered by the actual stage of life our planet is at.
Mm-hmm.
We are actually midlife in the life cycle of a planet. We're about 4.5 billion years old. And I've been told that approximately that length of time, our sun will expand and destroy all the planets in this solar system. So I feel that our crisis is the birth of a co creative universal humanity. And that the way the shift is actually happening is problems are evolutionary drivers.
Amen.
Crises is preceding transformation. And the members of our species that are attracted to participate in that emergence, in giving their creativity to evolve themselves in the world, are what I call pioneering souls of Earth. And they're in every culture, every religion, every size, shape, and age. But they have a similar quality of attraction to the future as an organism progressing toward the unknown.
Yeah.
Now, we are scattered in all our systems in education and health and science, technology. And what we really, I feel, to shift any of the systems to a co creative, co evolutionary quality is one of our greatest needs is to connect with each other, to find out what each other knows.
Mm-hmm.
I'm involved with a partner now working on an attempt to create a meta system that identifies people who feel they are evolutionaries. And you know, my wheel of co creation,
I know. I love it.
it's a diagram of our turn on the spiral is a wheel with 12 sectors: health, education, economics, science, and technology. And what we're saying is that has to be filled up now with people who are evolving the health system, evolving the governance system, evolving the economic system through innovations and creative solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could do just that as a movement, we would see the emerging world already in our midst.
Yeah.
And through our internet and our communications and our wonderful speakers like you, it would be, I think, the most attractive option open to the world is the connection of that which is creative, loving, and emergent.
Yeah.
And we're all here. And we don't have much time to connect because time is running out on this phase of evolution.
Yeah.
And far from seeing that as a tragedy, even though it could be and is from, if you're not participating in emerging, far from seeing it only as a tragedy, it is the way evolution causes jumps.
Amen.
By the crises being unable to be resolved the old way.
Yeah.
Because if we could resolve it like we have done before, by more of the same, we would.
Right.
But we can't. That's nature, that's Mother Nature's effort to really evolve a species or let us go extinct.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things that I find myself so aligned with you. I mean, there's actually several dozen, but one of them is this sense that chaos, breakdown, destruction is not necessarily a bad thing. That when you look at the whole history of big history, when you look at physical evolution, biological evolution, and cultural evolution as our first globally produced, evidence based sacred story, creation story, you see
Right.
countless examples of chaos, breakdowns, and destruction being precisely what's most necessary to catalyze creative transformation and the next stages or the next evolution of life. And that's certainly, we're going to have no shortage of chaos and challenges and breakdown in the coming decades and indeed centuries. And so, do we see that as a birth? Do we see that as a womb to call forth our creative response, or do we just despair and say, "Oh hell, the whole thing's going to hell in a handbasket"? And I think that our response to that, again, having the big picture, having this epic of evolution or big history or the universe story or this whole notion, this whole sense of cosmic conscious evolution, is the big picture that allows at least me, let me speak just personally, it allows me to deal with the chaos of my life, the chaos of our
Yeah.
culture, the chaos of our times, not from the place of, oh no, but from the place of, okay, wow, like curiosity, what's emerging? How can I participate in something so grand and so majestic that we may not even be able to see the full scope of it for another 2 or 3, 400 years, and yet we are in these early stages of something truly magnificent and truly, or at least potentially magnificent and potentially of true evolutionary significance.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try out an idea on you.
Okay.
I've mentioned it many times, but I'm getting more serious about it.
Okay. I'll probably do the same too because I haven't.
Nature does not have any respect for species. Billions and billions of species are extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And we are now participating in the sixth mass extinction ourselves, and we know we need to stop that. But it is my intuition that out of the extinction, not only of other species, that a new human species is growing. And the new human species has so many characteristics that we're familiar with, but we haven't added them all up.
Mm.
And I'm currently calling it Homo universalis.
Okay.
This is a species that sees the crises as an evolutionary driver,
Mm-hmm.
that is activated from within to find our part in helping something to evolve, that has an innate quality of hope and expectation for the future emerging into the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
who recognizes also that we are an Earth space species already,
Yes.
that as we restore Mother Earth and attempt to free ourselves from hunger, disease, poverty, and tyranny and war here, this is only the beginning of Homo universalis, who is probably in a universe filled with life. But that until we get our life story together here and begin to be aware that we are universal beings, that we won't have the attractor
Mm.
required to excite us forward, because we are a species who has always evolved. And we can't just say our goal is to sustain life as it is. We'll never do it.
Right.
And even if we got sustainable, we get terribly distressed
Mm-hmm.
and make a mess of it.
As we were doing.
Well, because
Yes.
what if you see our turn on the spiral, here's my big wheel of co-creation. And then, of course, there's the next turn on the spiral. And I've placed in there Homo universalis and Homo sapiens emeritus. And Homo sapiens emeritus, is glad to hear that the self-conscious, to some degree self-reflective and self-centered species is going, while a new species is evolving everywhere on this earth now, and I'm a Homo sapiens emeritus in that I sit up there on the next turn on the spiral and cheer us onward because I would like to be truly a Homo universalis. Okay.
Amen. Well, you are, in my experience, you are one of the shining examples of Homo universalis. And one of the things, Barbara, I want to sort of this whole theme of the future is calling us to greatness. What I was hoping to do in this was to have conversations with people like yourself who are well aware of the challenges that we are now facing and that we are likely to face or inevitably will face, and yet who have a way of holding this scary, challenging information in ways that motivate and inspire us to connect with others, to work with others, to learn from others, and to co-create the next stages in human evolution, or just the next stage in human evolution, where we work together and we're not fighting and killing each other over our respective beliefs or metaphysics, but we're realizing that where we can find common ground is good enough. We can find common ground in a deep time understanding of reality, an evolutionary understanding of reality that goes forward millions and billions of years as well as in the past. We can find deep commonality in our profound commitment to ensuring a just, healthy, and sustainably life-giving future. That it's not just about us, or our enlightenment, our salvation, our anything. It's about the collective. It's about humanity and the body of life and ensuring a healthy future for all of us. And it's about what I think I'm finding also common ground in so many diverse peoples of different backgrounds, religions, philosophies, metaphysics, is a valuing of science not just as a secular thing, but that science in some very real sense reveals the divine, that science reveals, that evidence reveals, evidence can help us have a more intimate, personal, I-thou relationship with nature, with time, with mystery. These are things that are fundamentally real, whether we believe in them or not. And so I'm wondering, since you've been sort of a pioneer on this and really a sort of a grandmother to so many of us in this movement, could you share a little bit about where you find inspiration in time? You've already shared a little bit of that, but where do you find inspiration specifically in time, nature, and mystery? Which I see I see time, nature, mystery as the three faces of reality. That is, what's real, independent of whether we believe it's real or not. And so, I'm just curious, where do you find inspiration from time, nature, and mystery?
Well, the first great inspiration is to notice the 13.8 billion years of evolution. If you look at it from the outside, you see this amazing creativity from quarks and electrons all the way on up to you and me having this conversation. Number one, I'm inspired. Number two, I see a tendency in evolution to more complex systems with higher consciousness, greater freedom, greater order, and connectivity. Mm-hmm. I like that because that's what I want for myself. Yeah. Number three, I feel that I and all of us are the universe in person. So that the feeling for wanting more life, more love, more creativity is the universe in us and me calling us to that. So instead of feeling like I did when I was a housewife, feeling this way as a neurotic housewife, I realized I was the universe in person, and I got affirmed in the evolutionary tendency within myself for more life, more love, more creativity. This then, I would say, the most important thing, I'm currently calling it the impulse of evolution within. Because whatever and however you want to call the impulse that got us from nothing at all to you and me here, that is within every single person.
Yes, amen.
As their impulse to express what? More of who their potential self is. And nature realizes potential. It's totally stunning how it gets more and more potential and more consciousness out of every crisis we've ever faced. So since we now know this, my impulse of evolution, and that as a teacher and educator with all everybody else's impulse that I'm working with, is to take us on a trajectory where we activate ourselves as expressions of the impulse of creation with the genius of evolution that's 13.8 billion years of genius. And I love your idea of the evidential reality as an expression of the divine, and particularly that you and I are incarnate
Yes.
with the evidential reality of the billions of years of evolution
Yes.
and act on it now. See, so the call for greatness is really the call of evolution itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Amen. One of the things I want to ask you about relates to one of the criticisms that sometimes people have leveled at me and others that are speaking about conscious evolution and the evolution of culture is sort of too much of a sense of one trajectory, one line. It's all getting better and better without an equal appreciation or an honoring or respecting of the fact that we do also see, rising civilizations and contracting civilizations. We see technologies becoming more complex, and occasionally some of those technologies are lost in cultures that overshoot their either population overshoot or resources. They overuse resources, and it's quite possible that we are in one of these phases of peak oil and the downhill slide, where we could be in the early stages, as John Michael Greer and others speak about. Richard Heinberg, I had a conversation with him the other day. Jim Kunstler, James Howard Kunstler, The Long Emergency. These are folks who are just as committed as you and I to this evolutionary sense of reality and are participating in that, and that we are that process become conscious of itself. But they also point out that there's a fallacy that should be avoided, or that they caution should be avoided, in terms of just assuming that we don't also have periods of inhale, contraction, breakdown, and that we may be in the early stages of sort of the contraction of industrial civilization in the way that we've been extracting and that sort of thing. So is there anything you'd like to say in terms of that? Because I actually found myself defending you at one point in a month or two ago, somebody who was saying, oh, well, Barbara Marx Hubbard is just sort of this sense that things are just going to keep getting better and better, and she doesn't have a respect for this breakdown and contraction. And I was saying, no, that's
Right.
you don't get her at all. So anything that you'd like to say about that? Because I think that's also something that's important.
Well, I am so aware of breakdown as very dangerous now, because to some degree we are the first species responsible for the breakdown as well as for the breakthrough. And what's new now is not breakdown, since we have five mass extinction, yet nonetheless it seems to have kept on moving to higher order. I mean, if you look at the 13.8 billion years, however many extinctions and losses of species, there's a tendency, which I think it's the most apparent thing if you look at the billions of years. I don't care what anybody says, there's a tendency to higher order, greater consciousness, greater freedom. The big difference is we are now responsible for the extinctions we're causing. Yeah. We're also responsible for the evolution we could develop. And conscious evolution is not just inevitable progress, it's being aware that you are evolution and you have some choice. Yes. As to how you evolve. And I think that's the greatest gift that any species has ever been given, is a choice about our own actions as to how we can evolve or devolve. Yeah. And we are devolving, but I also feel that industrial society, as it was in the last hundreds of years, is not what we would like to see forever continuing.
Yes, amen.
I love the book, The Great Disruption by Gilding,
yes,
in which he calls this breakdown a once in a civilization opportunity. to consciously create a culture that you consider to be more co-creative.
Yes.
Now, anybody who turns against that opportunity is just simply not taking the chances that we're given.
Yes.
And I think that you can be extremely aware of breakdown by but being aware of the newness. I think conscious evolution is as much a step forward as self-reflective consciousness was 50,000 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
We we realized we had a self, okay, that created all of civilization. Now, in the last maybe 25, 50 years since cosmogenesis was discovered as a process, is that we are aware that we're affecting our own evolution uh, by the crises we faced and the new capacities we have, spiritual, social, and scientific, technological.
Yes.
And if we could ever use our scientific and technological new capacities with love and creativity, we will be a universal species.
Yeah.
And I think it's extremely important to keep a direction of hope and greatness in front of us. Otherwise, you are personally responsible for deflating evolution.
Well, I agree. And one of the things that I also, I'm going to mention this to our viewers and listeners, that I too have found Paul Gilding's work, both his blog, the Cockatoo Chronicles. If you just put Paul Gilding in Google, you'll get there. He only writes a blog post once every few months, but the last 4 or 5 of them are stunningly hopeful. I mean, few people are able to look at the bad news in a more unflinching way and yet nonetheless interpret it in ways that motivate and inspire people. In fact, Tom Friedman at the New York Times, I think he said that if you only read one book on climate change, make it Paul Gilding's The Great Disruption. So I recommend that book, and I recommend his blog as well. Barbara, is there anything more that you'd like to say in terms of where you're inspired by time, nature, and or mystery?
Well, I am inspired deeply by mystery, time, and nature, and I've come up with a phrase for a state of consciousness, which I'm calling deep time present.
Deep time present.
Now, deep time present is I'm sitting in my own sort of inner picture at the hub of the wheel of co-creation of our turn on the spiral.
Yep.
And I am aware that I come from the origin of creation before time began. You might call that the eternal or the infinite or
Okay.
the one.
Okay.
Aware that every atom, molecule, and cell in my body is embodying the whole story of creation. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
aware of that,
Yep.
that deep time present. Third, I'm aware that I'm emerging, as is every person on earth, no matter whether they think they are or care or not,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what nature does. A deep time present is to accept all of that as the present incarnation of myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I do that with two or more in resonance, in an experience of wholeness and connectivity, it becomes revelatory. Deep time present reveals pattern, reveals the emergent design of our society to be a society of co-creators.
Mm.
And I really think whatever you want to call this process of creation, its intention is to create co-creators.
Okay.
That the creative process is creating those who can create with it.
Yes. Yeah.
If we do not, we can easily become an extinct species,
Yeah.
which
Exactly.
I think we would like to avoid.
Yes. Exactly. Well,
And so
especially when you've already expanded your sense of self, when your self no longer stops with your.
irritated.
I'm sorry. I think I spoke over you.
No, I'm just irritated with people who don't see that conscious evolution is a tremendous responsibility,
Yes.
an opportunity, not an optimistic nonsense.
Yes.
And I say a lot of people are prejudiced against optimism because nature optimizes.
I've had gazillions of conversations with you, and every single time you come up with new stuff, and I'm thinking, damn, I love what you do with language. That's fabulous. I'm with you.
Nature, when you think from no thing at all to everything it is, if that's not
That's
optimizing, I
that's
don't know what
optimizing.
is.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So if you're optimistic, you're optimizing.
Hmm.
And Norman Cousins once said to me, it's arrogant to be pessimist in the light of the creation that has created you.
I love it. I love it.
If you sit there in arrogance of being
Yes.
pessimistic, your every atom, molecule, and cell in your body was created by this incredible story, and you're pessimistic.
That- but that is a wonderful reframe because yes, I mean you don't think of most people don't think of pessimism as arrogance, but it really is. In the light of 13.82 billion years of creativity and all of this complexification of matter, energy, consciousness, and culture, in the face of that, to be pessimistic is definitely arrogant. I love it.
It is. I mean, it's arrogant.
Yeah, and what you're pointing to also, Barbara, is that to have hope, to be inspired, what Joanna Macy calls active hope, to have this sense of hope and inspiration based on the big story, based on big history, knowing who we are, knowing how related we are to all of life, knowing what the future is calling us to greatness. To be in action in the face of that is anything but Pollyanna. It's the opposite of simply assuming things are going to get better and better because we know that chaos keeps driving creativity. But we are conscious, alive today, and the only place that we can honor these billions of years of creativity is in the present. And the only place that we can be a blessing and of service and a contribution to the future is in the present. And so to connect with others who are conscious of that and to work together is, I think, the holiest work on the planet. It's certainly where I find my deepest sense of kin or family.
Absolutely. And you know, the tendency in nature to realize potential is really part of the implacable
Mm,
mystery.
mm,
Is that every creature, every part of the creation wants to realize, but the humans, the great thing about us is that we realize our potential is still way underused.
yeah.
You see, I don't think a cow or a cat feels it needs to realize more of its potential,
Right.
whether it's going extinct or not.
Right.
But I mean, every one of us, most of the discontent we feel is we're not realizing our potential. Most of the joy we feel is when we find the impulse
Yes.
within us that has unique life purpose for every person. Then we start expressing it, and we can be truly great when we do that.
Yes. Well, you know what this reminds me of is what, of course, Joseph Campbell, the great, mythologist, spoke about so often is the need to find and follow your bliss, follow that path where your joy and the world's needs intersect, and then pursue that with all that you've got, and that's where you find your greatest sense of purpose and meaning and inspiration, and can overcome challenges and difficulties. Um, I think that's exactly what you've been sort of calling all
I,
of us to.
I actually think for the type of what Teilhard calls Homo progressivus, attracted to the future as an organism progressing toward the unknown and yearning to be part of that, that type is totally turned on by the need to realize their potential, and the crisis is an evolutionary driver
Yeah.
for us. And when I started out with our crisis is a birth, if you and I've had 5 children, I can tell you birth is a crisis.
Sure.
That if you don't respond exactly right, you can kill the baby and the mother.
Yeah.
So Mother Earth, to be poetic, if I dare to, with all these sophisticated scientists, Mother Earth is giving birth to a co-creative species.
Yeah.
And I believe that Mother Earth's purpose is not that she should stay all the same. She has not for 4.5 billion years, as she's going to continue through us. But we are vehicles of the potential of Earth itself.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I find myself speaking a lot in is science settings and groups of skeptics and freethinkers and atheists and non-religious folk who are wanting to find more inspiration in what science offers and what traditionally gets associated with spirituality. And I found a way of, and I want to share this with you because I don't know that I've ever shared this with you, and I've been speaking a lot about this recently. Is I found a way I think that's been very effective in helping the less religious among us, the less spiritually inclined among us, to not bristle and to, in fact, to embrace language such as you've just been using. And that is that I think the most important, I would consider the single most important scientific discovery about religion or spirituality in the last 100 years, and I realize that's a huge claim I'm making, but I think it's true nonetheless, is the recognition that our brains are inherently relational. We can't not relate. That's the way our brains function, is that we relate. And the primary way that we relate is through giving human characteristics, human attributes to what is more than human, what's other than human. And it's often called personification or anthropomorphism, or but it's really having an I-thou relationship, a personal, intimate I-thou relationship with something that's more than human or unhuman. And so whether you speak of Mother Earth or Father Earth or Sister Earth or Sister Sky, all these are relational metaphors. And so when we relate to nature and to time and to mystery, in other words, when we relate to reality in a personal way, our lives work, our cultures work. I mean, we don't actually know of any culture in the history of humanity that survived for very long that didn't have an I-thou relationship with reality. But we've, of course, been treating nature as an it to be exploited or used for several hundred years. And so one of the things that I find common to all indigenous cultures, all native peoples, all tribal peoples, and all pagan peoples, and all peoples that have an intimate rapport with nature, with time and mystery, is we freely use personal metaphors. So I personally love Mother Earth language, and I don't have to take it personally. I mean, I don't have to take it literally, because it's like, if we're going to have, Thomas Berry said it well. Thomas Berry, of course, one of my great mentors. He said, the world we live in is an honorable world. To refuse this deepest instinct of our being, to deny honor where honor is due, is to place ourselves on a head-on collision course with the ultimate forces of the universe. He said, this question of honor must be dealt with before any other question. It's ultimately not a political, economic, or even an environmental issue. It's ultimately a question of honor. Only the sense of the violated honor of Earth and the need to restore that honor will awaken in us the energy needed to co-create a just and healthy future. And I think that sense of honoring is what native peoples have had, and what Mother Earth language and other kinds of personal language helps us get at.
Yes, I totally agree. And there's a phrase of, I think it's Martin Luther King, that the arc of history moves slowly, but it bends towards justice.
Yeah.
If you look at even the rise of morality, just to take that, and the rise of violence, is an excellent book by Steven Pinker on, I think it's called Our Better Nature, The Angels of Our Better Nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Better,
The better angels of our nature, right?
yeah, the better angels of our nature. And he's very scientifically and statistically recorded our violence to each other.
Has
And
decreased over
even
time. Right.
including the two world wars,
Right.
that it lessens, and that the way people used to treat each other without even thinking about it, torture and a debtor's prison, cutting people's, I mean, awful, awful, awful. The Queen of England would ask for somebody to be tortured in front of her. I mean, absolutely. The arc of history bends slowly, but it bends towards justice, morality, and in most human beings, not everybody, but by far the vast majority. And I would say that we're not trying to preserve culture as it was. I think we did a great job in self-preservation, self-reproduction, and the building of civilization. I don't think anybody is saying we want to preserve it the way it was. It's
Right.
too on equality, too much violence, too much unconsciousness. So we're hitting an absolutely essential crisis
Yes.
to evolve our species or not. And if we do not evolve, we will become devolve and maybe even extinct.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I've begun speaking about it recently in both religious and non-religious settings is that we're about to experience the great reckoning, which also I think is the great homecoming. The great reckoning is that where we've been out of right relationship to reality, to use mythic language, where we've been out of right relationship to God, we are about to experience the natural consequences of that. But it's also the great homecoming. It's like the prodigal species waking up to the fact that we've squandered our inheritance and we're waking up to our predicament, and hopefully we're coming home to reality. And I think the entire, again, I'm speaking mythically, but I imagine the entire body of life, the entire community of life cheering us on because they know that their survival, their thrival, their ability to even move, to continue into the future is largely related to how we relate to them. And so, to the degree that we come home to reality, come back into a mutually enhancing
Yeah.
relationship with life, with nature, and a respectful, honorable relationship to time and nature and mystery, the whole body of life is cheering us on and saying, yes, come on, you can do it, humans.
When I graduated from college in 1951, one of my professors said, I think all the problems have been solved. The major problems of humanity had been solved, he thought, in 1951. Everything that my generation, which was the last, was told to do, we now find is wrong.
Yeah.
We were to have as many get married and have as many babies as possible. The men were to fight, to grow, and to build. And we just won a Second World War, and we thought we were really great. And humans who started with no fur, no fang, no teeth, and no claws, in 50,000 years of growth had developed this incredible capacity to prevail until they saw it could destroy them.
Yeah.
And they didn't know. We did not know that over reproduction and over
And
capabilities and
consumption.
we did not know that was wrong. And I do not feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I think the casting of guilt too far back there when we were trying to survive. And I truly honor the indigenous people for having developed let's say, a more compatible, sustainable lifestyle. But they too, the minute they get a chance, begin to see they want to grow. So I would get rid of the guilt.
I'm not sure what I said that had you
Well, but
think
we're
that there was guilt.
complaining, not you so much, but people who say we've done it wrong, we have overgrown, we are no longer going to do that. We didn't know we were overgrowing in the womb. We didn't know having too many babies was going to destroy our environment. Now we do. And I just feel there's so much about getting back to something. I don't know what we'd be getting back to. I
Yeah.
think we're going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. And whatever it was that I said that had you think that I was meaning that we could have done it differently or should have done it differently in the past, I didn't. That's not accurate because
Okay.
when I speak of the Great Reckoning, all I mean is that life is a certain way, nature is a certain way. Ecology, in some ways, is the science of what it means to be in right relationship to reality, and if you're not, the consequences of that. So we have been out of sync with many ecological laws, but we didn't know better. We weren't intentionally doing the damage. It's just that now we're waking up to the fact that we need to come into alignment with the air, the water, the soil, the life of this planet. And it's a terrifying prospect because so many of our institutions, our ways of doing economics and law and medicine and politics, are human centered but not
Right.
life centered. And so it's a huge
That's
task.
right. And they have to change uh, in order to stop one form of growth and to cultivate yet another form of optimizing life potential, which I believe is in human creativity, in love, and eventually in the exploration of the universe beyond our planet.
Hmm.
And I think that when I say we're being born as a universal species, that's not poetic, actually. I think it's literal. We
Hmm.
are already extraterrestrial
Right.
ourselves in the solar system,
Right.
and we're going to go way beyond that. So I think there's a tendency for guilt that came right from also that Christian religion and the idea of us original sin and needing salvation from original sin. You know, if I thought, Michael, of anything that I would want to say might be wrong with our species, I have felt we've had an abnormal illusion of separateness from nature, from each other, and from spirit, or whatever is the mystery there.
Mm.
That it's abnormal. I felt about 6 years old. I said to my parents, this is not normal here. The violence against nature, each other, and the disconnect that would allow us to be violent.
See, I think I found Paul Shepard's work. He died some years ago, but he spoke about the fact that we are tribal creatures. We only thrive in community in the same way that bees need a hive to thrive, and other species have their context, their social context that allows them to thrive, and they simply can't thrive without that social context. Having a community of 200 or less people who know me, who love me, who are interacting with, that's what's native to the human thriving. And the fact that we've now been isolated from community in most cases, isolated even from extended family, most households don't have three generations living in a
No.
household anymore. And I think some of the craziness and some of the depression and some of the overwhelm and some of the terrifying sense of reality comes from our being estranged from the only context that humans have ever been able to thrive, which is community.
You know, Michael, I totally agree. And I want to tell you something about a step in my own work. You know, I have been teaching on the Shift Network, for example, for about 4 years, and have a couple of thousand students that have taken agents of conscious evolution and all of these types of things. And I have a new executive director of the foundation who's come in to help build community
Mm.
among these thousands of students who have been excited by this, as well as many others who are like yourselves, to see, because I felt so lacking in community doing things on internet all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And having lost my partner, Sydney, I suddenly got the shock that even though I have people like yourself that I love, I don't see you.
Right, right.
And I realized I can't go on. I'm giving it all. You have Connie. It's a very different thing if you have a really close partner. If you do not, as many people that I'm also teaching do not, because when you get
Yeah.
to be older, very often, for example, the women don't have partners, and nor do they have a real sense of how to do their new vocations,
Hmm.
because it's not so easy to go into the government or the healthcare system or something with an evolutionary perspective and think you're going to get very far
Right.
right now. So I would like your help in really conceiving of and communicating the call to community of those with an evolutionary tendency, however they see it, who need each other to express and be and learn and love. And I'm looking for a way to
Yeah.
do this that will, even for my own life,
Sure.
much less anybody else's.
Yeah. Well, I think what you've put your finger on is timely and important for so many people. I actually think that, I mean, you're right. Connie and I are in a very weird position because we have such an amazing, intimate, heartful, mission driven, evolutionary, mission partnership and life and marriage. And the fact that we don't have, we're always traveling, for 12 years, we've been traveling North America, living in other people's homes, sometimes with them there, sometimes not with them there. So we've got this weird sense of sort of continental community, but we're never
Yeah,
in one place for very long. So
right.
the true, authentic, deep, intimate community we have with each other. But I'm seeing more and more people express just what you just did, which is there's this craving for genuine, authentic intimacy that's not stifling. That's actually enhancing or
Right, right,
co-creative,
right.
because as we all know, there are some forms of community that can be very stifling of our creativity and stifling of our own emergent possibilities. And I think that peak oil and climate change, I think that the current contraction of our economy, where for most people in most sectors of society, we are not in a growth phase, we're in a contraction phase, unless you're
Right.
in the very, very wealthy. And I think that that's beginning to force people to move in together or move next door and share items. We're finding we're being almost forced by our economic situation to find ever more ways of regaining and reclaiming various aspects of community. And I think that's ultimately going to be a
I,
really
I,
healthy thing.
I, I think it's really a human necessity
Yeah.
in many, many ways, including survival through this great disruption,
Yes.
is that I don't think you can do this all by yourself.
Yes, exactly. And stay
And
sane.
nobody even wants to be all by themselves. So, particularly those of us who have reached out beyond our local environments, like I have, all over the world. I'm looking this woman Nina Patrick who's come in. She is has been one of my students, and she's a businesswoman. Is for the Foundation for Conscious Evolution to cultivate community and communion among pioneering souls,
Yeah.
and then to sustain us through the Great Disruption,
Yes.
so we can be at our best to serve ourselves and others. Because if we're isolated, there's not a lot that any of us can do.
Exactly. I just want to remind you of something, and not so much remind you, but remind whoever, or just share for the first time, whoever's watching or listening to this. My book, Thank God for Evolution. I think one of the reasons why it was widely endorsed by people in the sciences and religion and across the spectrum is because it doesn't just focus on sort of the theological, theoretical stuff, but the real practical stuff. How do we live together? How do we relate and communicate in ways that allow us to have a mutually thriving relationship? And so chapter 12 of my book is just practical exercises for couples and groups of people to help sort of create a mutually thriving context. So I just want to mention that if anybody's watching or listening to this, chapter 12 of my book, chapters 11 and 12 of my book, Thank God for Evolution, are practical tools and exercises and practices to thrive in right relationship to reality individually and collectively. And there's just some really useful stuff there.
Very good. Yes, thank you, Michael. I think that we should all look that. I love Thank God for Evolution. It's on my coffee table, so everyone's got to see it, whoever comes to see me.
That's great.
But
Well,
I'm really, really eager to recreate also at the aging end of the life spectrum of ourselves. That when my partner died of dementia, and I went to these dementia facilities that he was in, I couldn't stand it.
yes.
I almost thought I would die because there was nothing but demented people there.
Right. Well, this is
Because
something. Yeah. This.
and I I don't even know, but we have conscious birthing now and conscious conception. I think we're going to have conscious dying.
We have to. We absolutely have to. I mean, it's one of the things that I sometimes do in my evening programs is I do a segment on the gifts of chaos and death in an evolving cosmos. And
Mhm.
it's what we've learned scientifically, or if you want to use religious language, what God, what reality has been revealing about the nature of death at all scales of the cosmos that radically transform how we hold our own mortality and death. And so Connie and I, one of the things that I do is I have a slide that shows this guy in ICU. He's clearly unconscious, but he's alive. The technology, the tubes, and the machines are keeping him alive. And I ask this question. I say, our ancestors never had to say no to this.
No,
And
that's
yet
right.
we have to choose to say no ahead of time. Otherwise, this is the way most of us are going to die, just by default. So that's the de facto way. And and
Yes.
then I say, now thinking about it from a legacy standpoint, we often don't ask the question, who's paying for this? You would just think, well, our insurance is paying for it. But imagine this guy, and he's clearly in his 80s. Imagine this guy had a fabulous life. He had a wonderful legacy. He truly made a real and lasting difference in the world. And yet, in the last 7 months of his life, he was kept alive like this at the cost of 38 college educations.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
That's exactly
what's his
it.
net legacy?
I mean, so I think that choosing to die at the right time is just like choosing to give birth. I mean, evolution creates enhances freedom that has been going on for billions of years, more free choice. So the conscious dying and probably a conscious longevity is also going to be coming in. And I once had an audience where I said to people, you might be given the choice to go on living or to die by choice. And the audience was really distressed because they said, the whole thing, are you trying to play God, Mrs. Hubbard? No, it appears that we have been given the capacity to extend life unnaturally at great cost and great
Tremendous
suffering,
cost.
actually.
Yes, exactly.
And therefore, we are also given the choice not to.
Exactly. I mean,
And
yep. Connie and I have given, and this is a little vulnerable and risky for me to share this publicly like this, but I'll do so. Connie and I have given both sides of our family an extensive living will that lets them know what our philosophy, that we don't see death as an enemy. We don't see that humans are responsible for the existence of death in the universe or a punishment from God for eating an apple. We don't see any of that. That death is natural. It's necessary at all scales of the universe, and thus death is no less sacred than life. And that if or when we get to the place where we can't in any meaningful way contribute to either society or to our families, like caring for kids or grandkids or whatever, when we get to that place, or if we get to that place, we are going to call our family members together. We're going to say our goodbyes, and we are going to honorably, responsibly take ourselves out in the most sacred of ways, because
yes,
we do not believe that to just be kept alive for the sake of being kept alive when it's a cost to society, we think that's immoral, actually.
yeah, I agree. My son died of a brain tumor, and he had blastoma stage 4, and they were taking out so much of his brain. And finally, the doctor said to me, "Well, we could take him to rehab and keep him going." I said, "Going?
Yeah, right.
Well, would he ever
Yeah.
have his intelligence back?" No, but he will be alive. And I said, no, we're going to hospice.
Yes. Beautiful.
So
And
it
that's
was
that's difficult. I mean, it's not like I can't make that decision for anyone else, and I would never try to. And I know that there are some people, some dear friends of ours, who precisely in the process of their taking care of a profoundly disabled son or daughter or friend or whatever, that their own compassion has been evoked, and they have seen it as a positive thing. So I don't have
right.
any negativity to say to any of that, but I know that from just in terms of my will, my heart, my commitment, and Connie's will, heart, and commitment, this is sort of our stance.
Yes.
And I think that we have a death phobic culture. And I think it's very unfortunate. Hopefully, I think the baby boomers will shift that. I think the baby boomers will demand to die on their terms.
Well, they're not going to die in those horrible dementia
Right.
facilities. I
Exactly.
mean, really. And I also think we probably will be choosing longevity. But that has to be a really deep thing. If we do understand the telomeres and the reason for dying, there's a lot of effort, in extending life. And I'm very interested in that too.
I
Dying by
yeah.
choice and extending life by choice, possibly.
Yeah, I have less enthusiasm for the extending. I mean, that's fine. I understand that there are people who really value that, and but it's interesting. I've got an ongoing bet with Andrew Cohen. We with both Carter Phipps and Andrew Cohen. I bet each of them $100 that I'd be alive when Ray Kurzweil dies.
Well, you know what I think, if I may say so, I believe the capacity to extend life will not make sense on this earth, but let's assume that we do create space communities, for example, in the solar system. Let's assume that we're going to be explorers of the cosmos. I am not wedded to the body of Homo sapiens sapiens. My choice would be continuity of consciousness in many different bodies as an explorer of the universe. That's what I would like.
Yeah, well, and I don't know quite what to do with that because I did see the movie Transcendence, the one with Johnny Depp recently, and it was a real, as well as I saw the movie Her.
I saw her, yes.
Both of those deal with sort of these sorts of themes, but I'm less confident in the sense of consciousness outside of a body, outside of a biological body. I mean, maybe not. I don't know, but I do know this: that the thought that I would live forever or live even for hundreds of years is utterly depressing. I'm looking forward to being able to die and go back into the process. So,
Well, I'm sure you'll get your wish, but
uh, I'm sure I will too. So, Barbara, any last thoughts that you'd like to share around this theme of the past rooting for us and the future calling us to greatness? And then anything that you could share about how people can learn more about your own work?
I think yes, that you can contact me at evolve.org. And I am launching the next phase of the foundation for those who would like to be closer to one another and create evolutionary community as the emerging humanity. I would really love to hear from you. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. And any last thoughts on this notion of the past rooting for us and the future calling us to greatness?
Well, I think the impulse of evolution is the past in us that its whole tendency is to call us to emerge as more of our potential. That's the tendency of evolution itself that is calling us to greatness.
That's great. And what's on your? I'm curious as you look at the next year of your life, assuming that you're continued to be graced with good health um, and economy and world that's continuing to allow us to flourish. What do you see for yourself in this next year?
Well, I would like to become a global voice for the conscious evolution of humanity.
You'd like to become that. You are that.
I'd like to be at that at another level
Mm,
of creating global community around that impulse.
mm,
That I have been relatively narrow recently in my communication via internet.
mm.
And I am not exactly sure how I want to do this or how I would be invited to do this, but I feel that the feminine co-creator, the feminine evolutionary that I feel I am, needs that my voice and our voices need to be heard to encourage humanity to evolve and create more community, regardless of all these differences. The community is the communion of our spirit to evolve.
Yeah, Yeah, amen. Well, that actually leads me. I just want to. I know you need to go soon, but there's one other question I just really wanted to ask you, just because it's timely. It wasn't long ago you were in the news. The Vatican was criticizing you and some of the
Yes.
nuns. So where's this whole conversation at now in terms of conscious evolution within and your involvement in working with the nuns who are so deeply
Well,
appreciative of your work?
I'm going to spend 6 days in a retreat uh, uh, on the evolutionary Christ with Catholics. And I am going to put forward with the Catholics my understanding that the story of Jesus is the story of one of the greatest evolutionaries that humanity has ever known. And that I believe that he is leading the way towards the conscious evolution of humanity. And I would like to personally see the Pope. And I would like to have a conversation with Pope Francis and other Catholics. I'm not Catholic. I actually had no religion. I was Jewish agnostic from my origins. But I would like to see the Pope with other of my beloved Catholic companions and have him say what he once said to St. Francis centuries ago. Thank you, ladies. This is what we always meant.
Wow.
Conscious evolution is what Jesus was all about.
Mm.
When he said, "You will do the works that I do," Paul said, "and greater works than these will you do.
Mm-hmm.
Behold, I show you a mystery. You shall not all sleep. You shall all be changed." I believe that the Christian impulse that was in Jesus and Paul is the impulse of evolution that actually is about to be fulfilled.
Amen. Praise Darwin.
So if you have any chances to meet the Pope, I hope we could go together.
Okay, I would love that, Barbara. I would love that. Well, thank you so much for taking time to be part of this conversation on The Future is Calling Us to Greatness, and blessings on your
Thank
work.
you, Michael, for everything that you and Connie do. You truly are my evolutionary family.
Yes, same here. All right.
Bye bye.
Love you. Bye bye.